Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Rama Rama Hare Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama,
Rama Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Vrindavanam ki,
Jai.
Madhuram ki,
Jai.
Gangam ki,
Jai.
Gangamaya ki,
Jai.
Yamuna ki,
Jai.
Daswati ki,
Jai.
Krishna Island, Kirtan Mela ki.
Jai.
All glory to the Summer Lord.
Hare Krishna.
All glory to the Summer Lord.
Hare Krishna.
All glory to the Summer Lord.
Hare Krishna.
All glory to Sri Guru, Sri Guru.
Jai Shri Guru Govardhana.
The Lord's feet of our spiritual master are the only way by which we can attain pure devotional service. I bow down to his Lord's feet with great awe and reverence. By his grace and I can cross the ocean of material suffering and obtain the mercy of Krishna. My only wish is to have my consciousness purified by the words emanating from his lotus smile. Attachment to his lotus feet is the perfection that fulfills all desires. He opens my darkened eyes and fills my heart with transcendental knowledge. He is my Lord, birth after birth. From him ecstatic prema emanates, by him ignorance is destroyed. The Vedic scriptures sing of his character. Our spiritual master is the ocean of mercy, the friend of the poor, and the Lord and the master of the devotees. O Master, be merciful unto us. Give us the shade at your lotus feet. Your fame is spread all over the three worlds. We take shelter at your lotus feet. Srila Prabhupada ki! Class. Okay, give a little class. Hare Krishna.
Govinda ki.
Jai. So Prabhu, will you sing the, we have the benefit of your...
Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Gopi Jana Vallabha
So we're reading today from the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita Anjalila, Volume 1, and we're on Chapter 3. And it's kind of appropriate, there's a whole string of verses here of which there's no purports. So I'm going to read until we reach a purport. And suitable for what we're doing today, the name of the chapter is The Glories of Haridas Thakur. And just to explain for any newcomers, Haridas Thakur was a great devotee of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was the incarnation of Krishna who appeared in Bengal approximately 500 years ago, and whose stated purpose was to spread the congregational chanting of the holy names, kirtan, which is what we're doing today. And one of the most devout and celebrated of the devotees of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was a devotee called Haridas Thakur. And this chapter is called The Glories of Haridas Thakur. So it's giving some nice commentary about him. So it goes on to say, and I'll just read these verses. Everyone there began to speak of Haridas Thakur's great qualities as if they had 5 mouths. Hearing this, both brothers were extremely happy. The brothers we were talking about, there are 2 brothers called Hiranya and Govardhan, who were great learned sages. It was mentioned in the assembly that Haridas Thakur chanted the holy names of Krishna 300 times a day. Thus all the learned scholars began to discuss the glories of the holy name. I don't know how many rounds 300,000 holy names is. Anybody, any ideas how many rounds that is?
Sorry,
No.
how many?
300,000. You can get the calculator out.
More than 64.
More than 64. Anyway, all the learned scholars began to discuss the glories of the holy name. Some of them said, by chanting the holy name of the Lord, one is freed from the reactions of all sinful life. Others said, simply by chanting the holy name of the Lord, a living being is liberated from material bondage. This is all great for today, isn't it? Haridas Thakur protested. These two benedictions are not the true result of chanting the holy name. Actually, by chanting the holy name without offenses, one awakens his ecstatic love for the lotus feet of Krishna. So that's interesting. When a person is actually advanced and takes pleasure in chanting the holy name of the Lord, who is very dear to him, he is agitated and loudly chants the holy name. He also laughs, cries, becomes agitated, and chants just like a madman, not caring for outsiders. Liberation and extinction of the reactions of sinful life are two concomitant byproducts of chanting the holy name of the Lord. An example is found in the gleams of morning sunlight. As the rising sun immediately dissipates all the world's darkness, which is deep like an ocean, so the holy name of the Lord, if chanted once, without offenses, dissipates all the reactions of a living being's sinful life. All glories to that holy name of the Lord, which is auspicious for the entire world. After reciting this verse, Haridas Thakur said, O learned scholars, please explain the meaning of this verse. But the audience requested Haridas Thakur by saying, it is better for you to explain the meaning of this important verse. Haridas Thakur then said, as the sun begins to rise, even before it is visible, it dissipates the darkness of night. With the first glimpse of sunlight, fear of thieves, ghosts and demons immediately disappears, and when the sun is actually visible, everything is manifest, and everything and everyone begins performing his religious activities and regulative duties. Similarly, the first hint that offenseless chanting of the Lord's holy name has awakened dissipates the reactions of sinful life immediately. And when one chants the holy name offenselessly, one awakens to service in ecstatic love at the lotus feet of Krishna. Liberation is the insignificant result derived from a glimpse of the awakening of offenseless chanting of the holy name. While dying, Ajamil chanted the holy name of the Lord, intending to call his son Narayan. Nevertheless, he attained the spiritual world. What then to speak of those who chant the holy name with faith and reverence? Liberation, which is unacceptable for a pure devotee, is always offered by Krishna without difficulty. My devotees do not accept Salokya, Sharsti, Sarupya, Samipya, or oneness with me, even if I offer these liberations in preference to serving me. And just to say what these things are, Sharsti is to acquire the same opulence as Krishna. Sarupya is to achieve the same bodily features as Krishna. Samipya is to live always near the Supreme Lord. So what it's saying is that the devotees don't accept these things in preference to serving Krishna. So, we're coming close to the verse now with a purport. At the house of Hiranya and Govardhan Majumandara, a person named Gopala Chakravarti was officially the chief tax collector. This Gopala Chakravarti lived in Bengal. His duty as chief tax collector was to collect 1,200,000 coins to deposit in the treasury of the emperor. He had handsome bodily features and he was learned and useful, but he could not tolerate the statement that simply by glimpsing the awakening of the Lord's holy name one can attain liberation. Purport. Vaishnavas strictly follow the directions of the Shastras regarding how one can be liberated simply by a slight awakening of pure chanting of the holy name. Mayavadis, in other words, devotees who believe in the impersonal feature of the Lord, they cannot tolerate the statements of the Shastras about how easily liberation can be achieved. For, as stated in the Bhagavad Gita, Klesho Diraktaras Tesham Avyaktashakta Chetasam, impersonalists must work hard for many, many births, and only then will they perhaps be liberated. Vaishnavas know that simply by chanting the holy name of the Lord offenselessly, one achieves liberation as a byproduct. Thus there is no need to endeavour separately for liberation. Srila Bilva Mangala Thakur has said, Mukti Svayam Mukti Ganjala Sevata Sman. Liberation stands at one's door, ready to render any kind of service if one is a pure devotee with unflinching faith and reverence. This the Mayavadis cannot tolerate. Therefore the Arinda Pradhana, chief tax collector, although very learned, handsome and useful, could not tolerate the statements of Haridas Thakur. So, Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Sri Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Sri Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Omagina Timrandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakchuran Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutapada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagarchitam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvetam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Visakanvitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bando Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpa Tarupyascha Kripa Sindhu Vayevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Paramasundara. Paramasundara, Pandita,
Pandita,
Nutana,
Yutana,
Yovana,
Yovana,
Namabase,
Namabase,
Mukti,
Mukti,
Suni,
Suni,
Na,
Na,
Haila,
Haila,
Sahana,
Sahana,
Paramasundara,
Paramasundara,
Pandita,
Pandita,
Nutana Yovana,
Yutana, Yovana,
Namabase,
Namabase,
Mukti,
Mukti,
Suni,
Suni,
Na,
Na,
Haila,
Haila,
Sahana.
Sahana.
Anyone want to try that? Nobody's reading it from now. Okay, Paramasundara, very beautiful. Pandita, learned. Nutana, new. Yovana, youth. Nama Abase, by the glimpse of awakening of pure chanting of the holy name. Mukti, liberation. Suni, hearing. Nahila Sahana, could not tolerate. So just to read the verse again, the last verse. He had handsome bodily features and he was learned and useful, but he could not tolerate the statement by glimpsing the awakening of the Lord's holy name, one can attain liberation. So we're getting really wonderful descriptions of the potency of the holy name. And Srila Prabhupada taught us that the holy name of Krishna is actually non-different or the same as Krishna himself. So by chanting the holy name, we're actually allowing Krishna to dance on our tongue. And we're getting direct personal association with the Supreme Lord. And it's amazing to see how serious devotees have taken this whole concept of chanting the holy name. The Bhagavad Gita describes different paths of yogic practices, by engaging in austerities, by giving in charity, by engaging in detailed study, and engaging in severe yoga practices. And yet the Bhagavad Gita describes that the topmost yoga is Bhakti Yoga, which is repeated over and over again in the Bhagavad Gita. And Srila Prabhupada taught us that the method of engaging in devotional service or Bhakti Yoga in this age of Kali Yuga, in other words, in the age of quarrel in which we live, is by chanting the holy name. It is simple and it is sublime, and it is effective, and it gives huge benefits. So Srila Haridas Thakur was chanting 300 times a day. He was obviously doing very little else because he wouldn't have had time to do anything other than to chant the holy name. And scholars looking on at him were saying that the result of his chanting must be that he becomes freed from the reactions of sinful life. And others said that he became liberated from material bondage. And of course, these are all things which we might aspire to in life. We might think, it's great to become free from all our sinful reactions, or it's also great to become liberated from material bondage. But Haridas Thakur wasn't satisfied with that. He wasn't satisfied that that was the true result of chanting the holy name. And he took it further by saying, by chanting the holy name without offenses, one awakens ecstatic love for the lotus feet of Krishna. So in other words, what Srila Haridas Thakur is saying if you think about it. He's saying getting freed from sinful life, or the reactions of sinful life, is good. And becoming liberated from material bondage is also good. But the real business, the real nectar, the real goal is to awaken ecstatic love for the lotus feet of Krishna, to engage in loving devotional service. And what he's saying is that by engaging in devotional service, these other goals of becoming freed from the reactions of sinful life, or becoming liberated from material bondage, are automatically achieved if one engages in chanting the holy names and awakening ecstatic love for the lotus feet of Krishna. And Srila Haridas Thakur describes that a person who is in the advanced stages of developing love of Krishna in the way laughs and cries and becomes just like a madman. And people don't understand that. That doesn't mean that we all start rolling on the floor and chanting like madmen, because it would definitely create a very weird impression for people. But it's not to say that persons who are in the advanced stages of spiritual realization can behave like that. And the verses go on to say that liberation and extinction of reactions of sinful life, they're just like the gleams of morning sunlight, so that when the sun is coming up just like it is at the moment, I hope, can't be sure of that in this part of the world, but as the sun comes up, it dissipates the darkness and it removes all of the negativity that surrounds darkness. It describes the fear of thieves and ghosts and demons. As the sun is rising, all of these things are banished. And similarly with the chanting of the holy names, spiritual realization starts to flourish in this way. And it describes how offenseless chanting, and what do we mean when we speak about offenseless chanting? Everybody who was at Mangalarti this morning would have heard us after Mangalarti reading out the 10 offences to the holy name, which are the various barriers or obstacles that occur when we're chanting. We can be distracted, we can be thinking of many other things, we can be thinking that the holy name is having this effect or that effect. There's a whole range of different offences which we discuss every morning, or which we recite, with a view to trying to purify our chanting, that it becomes pure and offenceless. And it describes here that when one is chanting offenselessly, one awakens to service in ecstatic love at the lotus feet of Krishna. And then one of the verses describes, you would have heard the description of Ajamil. Ajamil, the story of Ajamil is an interesting story. Ajamil was a great learned Brahmin in the early stages of his life. But as he got on in years, he became very degraded. He actually became enchanted with a prostitute. And he became very degraded in his lifestyle, and he gave up all of his spiritual practices and became extremely materialistic in his life. But he had called his eldest son by the name Narayan. He had given his son the name Narayan, which is one of the names of Krishna. And even though Ajamil had lived right up to the end of his life a very, very sinful life, and when he was dying, the Yamadutas, who are the agents of Yamaraj, who come to extract a person from their body if they have some penalties or punishments to receive. And when the Yamadutas arrived, Ajamil saw them coming just on his deathbed, and he called out to his son Narayan to save him. And when he called out the holy name Narayan, immediately the Vishnu Dutas, who are the agents of Lord Vishnu, who come to save a devotee or to bring him into his next existence, the Yamadutas appeared, and they deterred the Vishnu Dutas appeared, and they deterred the Yamadutas. So just by accidental chanting, by chanting even without the proper motivation, Ajamil was still liberated and was still saved, which shows the potency. It doesn't mean that we take that chance. Because Ajamil obviously had some credits and was able to derive the benefit of that, but the potency of the holy name ultimately saved him. And coming to the last verse we have today, we have a situation where there is a person listening, a tax collector, who is also a person engaging in spiritual activity. He's a Mayavadi, believing in the impersonal conceptions of the Lord. And this Mayavadi, Gopala Chakravarti, became very irritated and agitated on hearing the words of Haridas Thakur. Haridas Thakur was praising the glories of the holy name and saying that just by offenseless chanting of the holy name, one can transcend other paths of spirituality and other goals, and that the goals of liberation and becoming free from sinful life are automatically attained simply by chanting the holy names. And the Mayavadi was irritated by this. It agitated him and annoyed him. And Srila Prabhupada quotes the verse in the Gita, which I'll just get, 12.5. Yeah, this is interesting because 12.5 is in chapter 12, obviously, and the name of that chapter is Devotional Service. And Krishna says at verse 2 of that chapter, he says, the Supreme Personality of Godhead says, those who fix their minds on my personal form and are always engaging in worshipping me with great and transcendental faith are considered by me to be the most perfect. So let's just absorb that for a moment. Krishna is saying, those who fix their minds on my personal form, in other words, on the personal form of Krishna, and are always engaged in worshipping me, in other words, worshipping the personal form of Krishna, with great and transcendental faith, are considered by me, considered by the Supreme, to be the most perfect. And then Krishna says, in the next verse, I suppose I should just read verse 1, because Arjuna asks, and this is the crux of the question, which is directly relevant to the Mayavadi, in essence criticizing Haridas Thakur, because Arjuna, in verse 1 of chapter 12 of the Gita, he says, which are considered to be the most perfect? Which are considered to be the most perfect? Those who are always properly engaged in your devotional service, in other words, Bhakti Yoga being engaging in the personal worship of Krishna and chanting his holy names, or those who worship the impersonal Brahman, the unmanifested. So Krishna unequivocally, clearly, and without any shadow of doubt, in case anybody has any doubts about these things, Krishna couldn't be more clear. He says, those who fix their minds, Shri Shri Radha Govinda ki, Krishna says, those who fix their minds on my personal form and are always engaged in worshipping me with great and transcendental faith are considered by me to be the most perfect. So that's the answer to that question, if anybody has any doubts about it. And then Krishna goes on to say, but those who fully worship the unmanifested, that which lies beyond the perception of the senses, the all-pervading, inconceivable, unchanging, fixed and immovable, the impersonal conception of the absolute truth, by controlling the various senses and being equally disposed to everyone, such persons engaged in the welfare of all at last achieve me. And then the verse that Prabhupada directly quotes, he says, for those whose minds are attached to the unmanifested impersonal feature of the Supreme, advancement is very troublesome. To make progress in that discipline is always difficult for those who are embodied. So what Krishna is saying in the Gita, when he's asked the direct question, should we worship you, Krishna, the personal form, directly? And is that a better form of gaining advancement than engaging in worshipping the impersonal Brahman feature? And Krishna says the better way of doing it is to engage in devotional service. He goes on to say, you can eventually come to me, Krishna says, you can attain to the Supreme eventually. But Krishna says it's very difficult. It's very troublesome. So, in this time in which we live, in which spiritual activity is very much a low priority for 99.999% of society, what hope is there of making spiritual advancement if we choose to take the difficult path? So this gentleman who was criticizing Haridas Thakur was somewhat offended by Srila Haridas Thakur pointing out that if one engages in pure devotional service by chanting offenselessly, he was offended by the notion that that is the topmost activity. Because he was thinking, oh, I have to engage in all types of complicated, confusing, very long drawn-out processes of spiritual advancement. And he thought, because many people do think this, many people think that unless you have to really struggle, that the activity, that the goal isn't worth attaining. And it may be, we may think, for example, if I want to climb Mount Everest, by eventually getting to the top, that has been a monumental struggle. And I've done it. I've achieved that particular goal after really breaking myself and possibly putting my life at risk to do it. And we probably think from a material point of view that in order to get something good, we really have to struggle hard for that. But that is not so. Because if we really want to attain the highest goal in spirituality, it is not necessarily something that we have to break ourselves to do. And that is the great blessing of the chanting of the holy name. In other eras, for example in Satya Yuga or Treta Yuga or Dwapara Yuga, there were other forms of spiritual realization which were difficult, and only great yogis could attain the benefits of spiritual practice. But the fantastic boon that has been given by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in this degraded age of Kali Yuga
it is like the silver lining to the very dark cloud of Kali Yuga, that simply by chanting the holy names of the Lord we can make huge spiritual advancement. In fact, we can attain the topmost spiritual benefits. And that's reiterated time and time again. The Bhagavad Gita itself talks about kirtan. Chapter 9, the name of that chapter is The Most Confidential Knowledge. And it says at chapter 14, Satatam kirtayanto mam yatatas chadridhavrata namayantas chamam bhaktya nitya yukta upasyate. Always chanting my glories, endeavouring with great determination and bowing down before me, the great souls perpetually worship me with devotion. So, today we're going to have an absolute festival of the chanting of the holy names, where it's not something that we do all the time, having a whole day dedicated to kirtan and chanting. And we have people literally coming from all over Europe and all over Ireland to chant together and to celebrate the glories of chanting the holy name. And of course, you know, this activity is, just going back to the first verse, or maybe it's the second verse in chapter 9, talks about devotional service as being the most confidential knowledge. And it describes it as being Raja Vidya Raja Guyam. This knowledge is the king of education, the most secret of all secrets. It is the purest knowledge, and because it gives direct perception of the self by realization, it is the perfection of religion. And most significantly, it says, it is everlasting, and it is joyfully performed. And today, I think we'll get a glimpse of the joyfulness of engaging in devotional service, because, you know, when people come together, chant together, and do it in a beautiful way, we have some expert kirtaniers. We have Ramanaja. Ramanaji from France, who we've already got a sample of his beautiful singing. And we have others coming today. It's really going to be very, very exciting. And it will be joyfully performed. So that's my few thoughts for the day. If anybody wants to ask any questions about any of that, or discuss it, clarify any points.
I have one to add.
Yeah.
At the beginning, just when he started, he said, Srila Prabhupada mentioned that the name of the Lord is non-different to the Lord himself.
Yes.
But there's a saying in Hindi, Hari se bara Hari ka naam. The Lord's name is even more powerful than the Lord himself. The example is when they were building the bridge between India and Sri Lanka to go and get Sita back. They were writing Ram on the stone and it was floating.
Mm-hmm.
But when Ram himself took one stone and put it, it sank.
I see.
Yes.
Okay.
And then, I'm not sure if it was Hanuman or Sugriv who told him, the difference is you are the Lord himself, you are putting the stone, so it's not floating, but we are your devotees, we're actually writing your name on it, Ram.
Yes.
And by writing your name on those stones, that's what's making it float. So
Okay.
that's where the name of the Lord is more powerful than the Lord himself.
Jai, that's a very, very nice example. Yeah. Yeah. And I think Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he gave very, very few written teachings. The Shikshastika really are the only verses, I think 8 verses, which again we read this morning. And the emphasis is on chanting the holy names. So, and we can see the potency of that. I mean, Srila Prabhupada, is the living embodiment of the potency of the holy names, because here was a simple sadhu coming from Vrindavan. Penniless, he came to the United States, and he simply sat down in a park in New York. What was the park's name? Hopkins Square Park, was that it? And he simply sat there and started to chant and started to attract the attention of young people who were also at that time seeking. They were seeking some meaning to life. The counterculture at that time in the 1960s was prevalent, when the younger people were kind of rebelling against the post-war materialism which was occurring in America at that time. And these young people heard the holy names. Srila Prabhupada was just chanting Hare Krishna. Of course, Srila Prabhupada wasn't just chanting Hare Krishna, but he was providing the whole philosophical background to showing and supporting the potency of chanting Hare Krishna. But his main message was, chant Hare Krishna. This is the Yuga Dharma. This is the Dharma of the age for making spiritual advancement. Because we do not live the lives of yogis. Going to a yoga class for an hour once a week or 2 hours twice a week isn't really going to cut it. You may develop a little bit of physical flexibility and you may improve your health a little bit, but it's just not going to give you any real tangible spiritual advancement. By chanting the holy name, Srila Prabhupada was saying, look, this is the Yuga Dharma. This is the recipe for all material ills. So when he attracted these young people, his movement flourished to the degree that when he died 12 years later, he had hundreds of temples and schools and other farm communities all over the world. Here was a man who came with nothing, and he was able to generate that amount of spiritual dynamism just by chanting the holy names. So we can see that, and I guess the other great legacy that Srila Prabhupada gave was that he gave all of us a lifestyle, a way of living our lives that we can engage in offenseless chanting. If we give up bad habits, if we follow what the Bhagavad Gita describes as the regulative principles of freedom, in other words, by giving up meat eating or illicit sexual connections or intoxication, these are not restrictions. These are actually the portals or the gateways to freedom, the regulative principles of freedom. And if we follow a lifestyle, following these precepts and adding to our lifestyle the chanting of the holy names in a systematic way of chanting a certain number of rounds every day and engaging in congregational service, we will inevitably make outstanding spiritual progress in our lives. Sri Harinam Prabhu ki, Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita ki, Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki. Hare Krishna, folks. Krishna. Thank you for listening.
Very kind of you to come and sit in this.